was gonna mention, yes, I've been talking to Mitch.
Can we mention it?
Yeah,
Okay,
she just got it.
okay.
Does she work?
Yeah.
All right. Oh, she making. We'll let her come on out.
You know the city's getting big in the
East Main Street.
I'm telling you. Thanks.
Thank you. We were just talking about you when Rob came.
Just waiting here.
Let us bring the city council meeting to order. We're gonna stand for a moment of silence and have a pledge, be led by the Pledge of Allegiance. A moment of silence. Amen. Mayor Pro Tem, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Item 3, we're going to have the approval of the minutes of the November 25th, 2024 and December 6th, 2024 City Council meeting.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any that oppose? Ayes have it. Item 4, approval of the agenda for the December 16th, 2024 City Council meeting.
So moved?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Any public comments? Have none. Thank you. So we're moving right ahead. Item 6, Board and Commission Appointment Board for the Architect, Design, and Historic Review, HARP. Christy Lindsay, City Clerk, is our presenter this evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Staff is recommending Mr. David Williams to be appointed to the HARB Board. I have reviewed his resume. He is qualified, he is a city resident, and he is looking forward to serving on this board if you all choose to appoint him.
We have any questions of Ms.?
Christy, was this the only opening on HARB, or is there another one?
So we have 2 openings currently, so this will still leave 1 vacancy on HARB, and then we also have 1 vacancy on the Bike Ped Committee, but all other boards are full.
But everyone has enough to make a quorum.
I am going to move to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any that oppose? Ayes have it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 7, award the bid of a modular fire training drill tower at Fire Station 1, City of Spartanburg Fire Department. Presenter will be Phil, Assistant Fire Chief, City of Spartanburg Fire Department. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, ladies and gentlemen, council, for allowing us this time to come before you to request permission for our fire training tower be added to the facility at 450 Wofford Street. So the current headquarters, we're finally in. Yay, thank you very much for that. We're enjoying the facility. It is state of the art. It is meeting most of our needs. Actually, it's meeting all of our needs with the exception of the training tower, which brings us here this evening. As you know, the old training tower at the old fire station was out back. We utilized that for our personnel to utilize for training, both physical fitness training, fire training, elevated stairwell training, ground ladder training, and aerial apparatus training as well. When that building came down, we lost that capability. That capability was not designed into 450 Wofford Street, so we are proposing for the purchase of a training drill tower, as you see up on the screen in front of you. We identified the needs that we needed in training to include physical fitness. This concept is dynamic design. It helps contribute to our ISO points, which we need every point we can get to maintain our ISO 1 on that revolving process of inspections. We can utilize this for public education, new employee testing and training, and then maintaining our own training requirements. There also could be a possible change with OSHA as we get down the road that may mandate physical fitness to some level. This tower will assist us in maintaining that mandate of physical fitness with the firefighters. Some examples: as our city grows, We all know downtown, there's space limited on going out, so we're starting to go up more and more. So we have a lot of stairwell training where our folks have to train carrying the hose, cylinders, and all the equipment we have on the ground to the elevated levels to where the fire could be on the upper floors. Additionally, we have rope rescue training off the side of these towers. We have window cleaners that are out almost every day on these mid-rise, high-rise buildings. Our folks are responsible for rescuing those folks should they get stranded, trapped, or have malfunction of their equipment. We can utilize this tower as well to train our folks to go get them and safely lower them to the ground. Additionally, we have elevated confined space. Confined space doesn't always happen on the ground. These buildings have maintenance lofts that are higher level. Some of those lofts have transverse floors, where we go equipment between floors. If something happens there, our folks need to be able to be trained to train within those floors and that kind of equipment. So what got us here today was an open bid process. We sent out proposal 2425-10-22-01. It was a competitive bid. We required a NFPA 1402 compliant tower, which is what you saw earlier. We required state engineered drawings and review of Spartanburg code enforcement, which we had and got approved. We required an open design concept, construction requirements for on-site with the installation, and then maintenance of the said tower. The location of where the tower is going is, if you look at the picture above, north is to the top of that picture where that red box with the X in it is where the tower is going. So if you're on the north side of our building, on the railroad side, where the old loading dock was, which is now our gym, that's going to go in front of that. If you recall, we had 2 of the roll-up doors removed and windows were put in for the gym, and then the 2 roll-up doors remained in the middle. This tower is going to be placed in the middle in front of those roll-up doors. So there'll be a space between the building and the edge of the tower, approximately 10 to 15 feet because of the overhang, and then that tower is going to be erected up in that location. We had 1 proposal submitted that was affordable drill towers. They met all the standards and requirements for the project. The proposal came in at $72,750. That included a tower that is 43 feet and 6 inches tall. The existing work that we added to the building with all the rooftop air conditioning and air handlers brings the total overall height of the building to 39 and some change. So this structure at 43 feet is only a few feet higher than the current height of the building. So we're not really protruding into the sky with this. It is nearly plane with the height of the building. It will take up a 13-foot width by 18-foot length, and it has essentially 6 floors with a landing in between each half floor. So that gives us the ability to simulate that rise through a mid-rise, high-rise structure to each landing and to each floor. And there's props and attachments that we can add to that to simulate working into those floors, as well as our ground ladder work, our aerial apparatus work, and then hose placement, standpipe operations. It's a very versatile tool. It's actually more versatile than what we had in the old City Hall building, because that tower was steel and concrete, and all we were able to do is move bodies and hose, and that's all we could really do. This really opens us up to more dynamic ground ladder training, more dynamic aerial apparatus training, and then gives us more room to train with the floor width, because these landings are probably 3 to 4 times the size of what we had downtown in the old concrete tower. And do you have any questions?
The old concrete tower was high? How high?
It was six stories tall. So that was roughly, I actually think with the top and then the antenna on top, it was probably closer to probably 80 feet if you added that.
And this
The antennas
one's
were on top. This one's
76?
83,
Oh,
83 feet 6 inches tall from the ground, from the concrete up.
And this will be in a fenced area?
Yes, sir. So it's in, if you're looking at the front of our building, we have the secured gate to the right along the railroad. We have that same secured gate on the rear on Farley Street. Both those gates remain locked and closed unless we have something going on where we control it open.
You said this is at a proposal price. You don't have the actual price?
This is the price of the request for proposal, so this is the price.
Oh, okay.
Chris, what's the funding source?
We've got it in the operating budget for FY '25, current year.
And do we budget it within the operating budget for this in July?
Yes.
How long does it take to get this constructed?
If you approve this tonight, and we can have the purchase order entered into procurement by the end of the week and issued by the end of the week, we could be on their calendar by the end of January. It's a 3-day installation.
So not as long as it takes to get a fire truck.
No, ma'am.
As we're still cleaning up from Helene and recovering from all of that, are these structures built with inclement weather
They
in
are,
mind?
So it's anchored to the concrete, and I apologize, that specification is not on that slide. And I have that on my desk, but I don't have that with me. But it is designed for the wind. We did talk about that and look at that post-Helene. Fortunately, if you look at the wind in that area, most of that wind, even if it's coming from the north, has a break of the north side hill there on, just went blank, on Farley is one, because we're kind of lower in that hole, in a bowl right there. And if it's coming from the south, the building will break it. So there's not a lot of wind, there's a lot of swirl, but it's not a high velocity swirl that happens back there. But this is designed for the wind. Now, if we're talking about the 80-mile-an-hour sustained winds that Helene brought, you know, I would like to think, and when I spoke to them, they felt that this would be, but engineering on that I don't have an answer for them.
Any other questions?
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we approve the
Second.
proposal.
Second,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem, all in favor?
Aye.
Any that oppose? Ayes have it. Thank you, sir.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
We're at 8, award the bid of the construction of 2 aircraft hangars at the Spartanburg Memorial Downtown Airport. Presenter will be Kevin Limehouse.
Thank you,
Not
Mr. Mayor.
Terry.
Members of council, yeah, I'm not Terry, but if it helps you, I will speak with a British accent later. A civil one for you all this evening. Thanks to a grant from the Department of Commerce, we were able to receive some funds for some economic development in line with our master planning at the airport for 2 additional hangars that you see on your handout. And we've put this out for competitive bid. We'd like to award to the lowest bidder, E.S. Walker, who's a company that we've worked with in the past, and just seek your approval. Certainly happy to answer any questions as best I can in Terry's absence.
So where exactly are these going?
Yes, sir. So if if you think of Kensington, they're kind of next to them, going past the T hangars, heading out to the road.
Heading out to John B. White, am I correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we have a rendering of what they're gonna look like, or?
No, sir, but they're pretty standard hangars, matching, you know, the designs of some of our others.
So they would be similar to what was built in the last year?
Correct, yes, sir.
That's just the open air pavilion style, or do they have walls?
They're walls, yes, sir, they're walled in.
Are these replacing any of our current ones? No, so
No, ma'am,
we
these are
will
new build.
own and operate
Correct,
these.
yes, ma'am.
And then what was the bid amount versus the grant amount?
The bid amount was $1,350,000 and some change, and I can't recall the grant amount, but I can find out from Terry and
I believe it's part of an allocation of $5 million from the Department of Commerce to support economic development at the airport. And so this is one of several projects to be funded by that allocation.
And what are the other projects? Have they been decided as of yet?
Some of the taxiway work and additional upgrades to allow us to handle more business, including perhaps some improvements to our existing hangar stock as well. Some of them that have some age on them.
And that amount for these 2 hangars is within the range of what we expected versus what our other initiatives will be?
It's actually a little bit better than we were trending about a year ago.
Very good
So,
price.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions?
I make a motion that we award the bid for the construction of the 2 hangars.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any that opposed? Ayes have it.
Thank you.
Item 9, we have a public hearing. And so the way this will work, this is second reading. A, ordinance to provide the annexation of property located at 2810 East Main Street. Said property is Spartanburg, South Carolina, which is further identified as the parcel ID 7-10-00-001.01. This is, which one is this? QT?
QT.
This is the QT. Mr. Kohler here for any questions.
I'll stand here just to check
Okay.
if there's any questions, but if there's not,
Yeah, we still got to open up a public hearing.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion, we open a public hearing.
Second.
All right, public hearing, the way it works, we have 20 minutes to discuss this item, 10 minutes per side. If you would like to speak on behalf of, in favor of annexing the QT into the city limits, please stand and give us your remarks. If you would like to speak against the QT coming into the city limits, being annexed into the city limits, please stand and give us your remarks.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion, we close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Questions of Mr. Kohler? I entertain a motion.
I move that we accept the ordinance as presented. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, any opposing? Ayes have it. B, ordinance to provide the annexation of property located at 2097 Southport Road. This is the Bojangles.
that's right.
We have to open up a public hearing.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion, we open a public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're opening a public hearing. We have 20 minutes to discuss this item. The way it works, if you would like to speak in favor of the item coming into the city of Spartanburg, please stand, give us your remarks. If you would like to speak against this property coming into the city of Spartanburg, please stand, give us your remarks.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we close the public hearing.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, I entertain a motion. Any questions of Mr. Kohler?
Make a motion, we approve the ordinance as read, item B.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any that oppose? Ayes have it, great, awesome, awesome.
Thank you.
2 pieces of property. C. The ordinance to amend the City of Spartanburg, South Carolina zoning ordinance and comprehensive plan land use elements by amending section 206, change the district boundary, specifically property located at 100 Hudson Barksdale Boulevard, and is further identified as tax map ID 7-12-15-009.00 as part of a parcel of the City of Spartanburg, which is Zone R6, with the land use designation of General Residential District to be assigned a zoning designation of DT5 with land use designation of Downtown Code District, providing the servability and effective. First reading ordinance. Ms. Fredolyn Frazier, good to see you, Planning Director.
Good to see you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm trying to advance, you'll have to forgive me. Here we are. Great, so the item before you this evening is a rezoning for 100 Hudson Barksdale Boulevard. Gosh, I cannot see that at all.
Look up to your left.
So just to give you an overview of the rezoning process to date, with every rezoning, you know that there are several steps. So the first step is a public information session, and that session was held November 13th. We did not receive any public comment at that time, which meant the application then moved on to Planning Commission. The Planning Commission met on November 21st and unanimously voted to approve this rezoning. And that brings us to where we are today for the first reading of this application. Should it be approved tonight, it would then move to second reading in your January 13th meeting. That's a little bit of the overview. So a bit of the rezoning itself, The applicant is Brian DeBruin and Jenny Reyes of Van Rock Holdings. You may be familiar with them with some other projects. And so the request here is to reclassify 100 Hudson Barksdale to, from residential, R6 residential, to the proposed DT5 downtown code district. The current site consists of, or is comprised of 1.4 acres. It's also known, and you may be familiar with this property as Liberty Square Townhomes. Adjacent properties include, in terms of zoning, DT5 and DT6 to the north, and then you see a mix of different zoning classifications to the south, east, and west, and we'll talk a little bit about that in just a minute. So here is an aerial view of the property. As you can see, it's bounded by Henry to the north, Hudson Barksdale to the east. To the south is East Lee Street, and then to the west is South Liberty. Here's a street view, just to give you a little more context. As you can see, as you're heading west on East Henry, that is the hot spot there, convenience center, just to give you some reference points. And then in the foreground, way back there, you see a little bit of the Fitzgerald Apartments. And then to your right is the rear of the Bethel United Church. Just a couple of interior shots of the property. And to the really crux of our discussion here is the existing zoning. As you can see, the property is surrounded by a mix of different uses. And as I mentioned earlier, DT5 immediately to the north, which serves as a transition to DT6 as you move into downtown. And then you also have limited office district to the right or east there, and that's that light green color that you see there. And then immediately to the left is the church, which is a religious institution, but it is zoned R6. And then as you move farther south, you begin to see more residential and a little bit of business zoning. And to give you some activity in terms of reference, what are the current activities, active uses that are there on the ground? Of course, we envision that some of these uses will probably change as the city evolves. But as I mentioned, there are a mix of uses. As you can see, commercial and retail to the north with the fast sign. You see the Boots and Sunnies, the hot spot. There's the Duke utility yard directly across the street. And then again, more academic and institutional uses surrounding the south and residential to the south as well. So with every rezoning, there are 5 criteria that we use to evaluate the suitability and whether we should grant or recommend approval of a rezoning. So it is consistency, compatibility, suitability, marketability, and accessibility. And I'll briefly just walk through those for you. So in terms of consistency, just based on what staff and the Planning Commission reviewed, we see that this is very compatible with the comprehensive plan and the fact that this area is designated as an infill growth center. So as you look at our future land use, this is a use that we would anticipate occurring in this area. And as I mentioned, we already have an existing or smattering of different uses already, but this DT5 will give us some other leverage points as we move forward, and I'll touch on those in just a minute. Compatibility, we did not see any challenges in terms of the change in zoning classification causing any issues with compatibility. It does conform with nearby properties, but we want to keep in mind that this area will ultimately transition anyway, so we do see this as an infill corridor, right? And in terms of suitability, what the applicant is proposing here is first to renovate this property, but then the long-term goal is actually a mixed-use multifamily redevelopment, which certainly aligns with the vision that we see here. Marketability, we do not foresee any challenges in terms of marketability of the site, no adverse impact here, and potentially may be enhanced in terms of marketability. And then availability of utilities are all in place for either the renovation and redevelopment of the site. So given this analysis, staff and the Planning Commission request council's approval of this rezoning request. And additionally, we really feel strongly about the fact that it ties closely to the vision that is articulated in the comprehensive plan. And the fact that we moved to a DT5 will also help reinforce the urban framework that we want to see in terms of character. So it gives us an opportunity to work closely with developers to get the type of vision that is articulated in the comprehensive plan. Questions or comments?
Yes, I have a question. I wasn't here for the last meeting, you know. I just want to know the real purpose of the rezoning of this property. And does that mean then that you're going to start, you know, rezoning more properties in this area, look at that area?
Well, I mean, it's all incumbent, you know, it's really applicant-led. So this was a request by the applicant, so we can entertain it and approve it or not. So that is the city's prerogative. We provided the analysis and see that it does align with future plans and what's envisioned for the area. And additionally, the applicant has up to a year to present a development plan, or else we don't move forward. So they have to give us, within 6 months, a development plan in terms of what's envisioned there, and then they can actually ask for a 6-month extension, but no more than a year. So we are expecting some type of broader development plan presented. They did share with us that in the near term, they want to just renovate, but then they have plans for a larger redevelopment of the site.
Okay, now does that mean with the rezoning that you're going to put more pressure on the owner to do something about the properties?
If there are complaints about the property, I would certainly like to know that, and there are vehicles, whether it's being rezoned or not, for us to address that.
Okay. One other question. I am hoping that this does not mean then more properties are going to be, and I'm trying to think of a tactful way to ask my question. Maybe I should not ask that here, because let me just hold off on that.
But these apartments are occupied
Yes.
currently.
Yes.
Yes.
And I think they're probably full. There's
Most of them are occupied, and I know that there is some work that needs to be done there because it has been some complaints about those properties because some of the tenants, I don't care to name names because I don't want the owner going after the tenants. But I do know that there has been some complaints about some of the apartments there.
So if their intent was to renovate, they wouldn't have to have it rezoned.
No, they would not.
So I guess I'm curious as to the timing of the rezoning request. Because if they have a year, possibly with an extension, but if their intent is to renovate, I mean, they're likely not to redevelop for some period of time. So I'm just trying to understand the logic.
Well, they have presented this as something that they want to advance in the near term. And given what they saw, they're seeing in terms of redevelopment activity and what's occurring in the core of downtown, felt that this timing would probably get them in a favorable position for the redevelopment of the property. Again, it is our prerogative to decide whether or not we want to advance the application or not.
So is their intent, I mean, okay. The DT5, how does that change the density of the property?
Well, it would not significantly, but I can't, sorry, I don't have the full,
I mean, it's an upzoning for sure. I mean,
Yes.
it would, I don't know with certainty, but I think the property has recently changed hands, and the new owner, we can speculate, is pursuing the rezoning now to ensure that if they were to undertake the design of a more dense redevelopment of the site, that would be consistent with the city's and the council's support. And so sometimes we see situations like like this where a prospective rezoning is sought on the front end before a design is developed or even a financial analysis has been undertaken, just to see if there is consistency with the vision of the community for that site.
We're just giving them realistically 18 months to test the market on potential concepts.
12, 6-month time period, then a 6-month
Well, it's a
extension.
year. I thought you said a year and then an additional 6 months.
No, it is 12 months total.
12 total.
12
So
months
we're giving them
total.
a year to test the water.
Correct.
But realistically, we're not gonna see any short-term renovations. This is just an exercise to do a market viability assessment.
The applicant, unfortunately, I don't believe, oh, he is here.
Oh, yeah.
Is it appropriate for them to
Yeah.
provide comment? Thank you.
Yeah.
Good evening. My name is Brian DeBruin, one of the principals at Van Rock. So I know what we're asking seems a little unorthodox, so if I could just kind of step back and re-explain our thought process. We are scheduled to close on the property the beginning of next year, and during our due diligence, we found that the current zoning doesn't meet the density standards. So at some point in time, the property was rezoned, probably with a development code, and the current zoning is overly dense for what, the current property is overly dense for what the zoning has. So for us, the first thing is, it's a non-conforming use, so can we fix that by rezoning? And then the second was, what is the most appropriate new zoning for the property, which is how we got to this. And then really the third, we're based out of Greenville, and so over the past certainly 5 years, one of the things that we've seen in Greenville happen more often than not is a property like this would be purchased, rezoned, and immediately vacated. You would have essentially a mass exodus of the existing tenant base, and then a new project would come in. Most likely, that existing tenant base could not afford to stay. And so the unorthodox nature of what we're asking is really because of what we've seen in the past. So our intention here is to not only maintain affordability at the site, but in some ways increase it. And for affordability, that would be 75% of the units at 80% AMI or less. My understanding with talking with the Housing Authority is somewhere around 4 vouchers are used on the site. Our intent would be to increase the amount of voucher participants on this site. And then the third aspect of that is there's a significant amount of deferred maintenance at the property. Not full-scale renovations, but things need to be fixed that just haven't been fixed in a significant amount of time. So for our purposes, we would want to come in, similar to what Mr. Story said, knowing what we can do at a point in time in the future and plan for that, but fix what needs to be fixed now, maintain affordability now, and 3 to 5 years from now, have a project that can go forward that is not a, mass exodus of folks kind of, in a 30-day notice period. And so if we're kind of timing it out, if it's 12 months for us to submit and then, another 12 months for a permit, that starts to make sense that we can kind of be transparent in what this project's gonna look like 3, 4, 5 years from now, not 90 days from now.
Is your closing of the property in January, early next year, contingent on this rezoning?
It is, but it's a contingency we've actually already waived. We would still most likely purchase it in some form or fashion. For us, though, we would still have to get over the non-conforming use before we could purchase it component.
So question.
And non-conforming use might not be the right terminology.
But that's already grandfathered, right?
It is. I would have concerns on, where that line starts and stops. If there was a fire in one of the units burned down, my understanding is that we would be unable to rebuild that unit because of the density.
But given the timeline, you mentioned 12 months for a plan, another 12 months for permit, takes you out. What happens if that there's not a plan submitted within the 12-month window and it reverts back to the R6? It doesn't?
the conditional rezoning is frowned upon. In other words, we can't rezone something and then say, if it doesn't happen, we're going back. But
So
there's nothing
it's
that would prevent.
days.
But there was nothing that would prevent this body from rezoning, going
I
back.
see.
So if we don't see the plans that shape the way we think they ought to be, and the transparency's not there, and the planning's not, then this body would have every right to go back to another zone. Just, it'd be the same process we're going through tonight.
But then what happens at the end of so then nothing happens at the end of the 12-month?
Unless you prefer it to.
I see. So we couldn't take action on it for 12 months, even if we wanted to. But once that 12 months is over, that's where I think I got confused, because that was a curveball.
The danger I see is that if it's rezoned tonight and Mr. DeBruin decides to sell it or decides to dispose of it, or instead of affordable housing, he decides to do something else that's
Okay.
allowed in that rezone, like the extreme example would be a junkyard, it's not. But then at that point,
No
that
junkyard.
use becomes grandfathered in, so you're stuck with it. That's the challenge with this conditional approach to rezoning.
Is it common or orthodox for an applicant to apply for rezoning for property they don't own yet?
Yes.
So what prevents anyone from
The
just
owner's
trying
got to
to?
sign off on it.
Owner has
And
to
Mr.
agree.
DeBruin's got probably a power of attorney of some sort to act on behalf of the owner, but the owner has to be involved in the request.
Okay.
And how do you feel about this, Bob?
Oh, I think as long as over the next 12 months, there's a real shared transparency and plans that begin to take shape. If they're not, then if we see it heading in a direction that we don't think is an appropriate use of that area, then I think we would begin to pull the plug or back away from it. But I think Mr. Bruin's got a history. He's done a property here already. He's engaged in 2 other ones that I know of. So again, it'd be incumbent upon staff to work with him and to make sure that communication is full.
Councilwoman Brown had a question.
Brian, thank you. I have all the confidence in the world that you will do is what you say you were planning to do. My question is, fixing what needs to be fixed now and looking down the road at more density, is that how I understand it? Redevelopment? My only concern, and I think we've talked about this before, is how that is done to ensure that folks, while new development would be occurring, that the current folks that are there in some way or have a home still to live in.
Yeah.
And I think you and I have talked about that before, about some of those projects in Greenville, how that's not how that happens. Whereas I feel like our body is very different, and that we're trying to be intentional about growth and development when it comes to housing and doing our very best to ensure that people are not displaced.
Would you mind if I shared a way that we're at least trying to sort
Yes.
that through? And so there's currently 2 vacant units at the property. And during our due diligence, there was at least a thought on the part of the owners to go in and renovate those. We asked them that they don't. You know, we're 30 days from closing. Our ideal scenario would be we renovate those, and now we can at least start the process of transitioning 2 tenants over. Now we can start renovating. And it's only 40 units in a calendar year. That is a manageable thing, so that everybody has an opportunity to stay, that wants to stay, and move into a newer unit. And we've done that in the past, and it works really well. So you almost have to create vacancy to then, displace or prevent displacement. Not to say that it'll work 100% of the time. You might have some folks that just don't want to stay. They don't want to be around where units are being renovated or things like that. And that might create additional vacancy, and then we'll speed up our process. But that, again, I know this is an unorthodox way of going about it. We are just, trying to figure out, because we have so much going on in Spartanburg, the last thing I want to do is go in with a redevelopment project today and 40 people are going out tomorrow. Now, how do you sort through that? And there's, I think, a lot of, what ifs. This is just us attempting that.
Anything under DT5 goes before DRB.
For design.
For design, right.
But not for renovation.
Depends
It's
on
more
the
than
depth
50
of the renovation.
50%.
And what, under R6, what's the, I mean, I know this is a non-conforming use, but what's the standard density allowed for a property like this in R6?
It is, I can guess.
Considerably more.
But, it's,
Don't, I mean,
it's fewer,
directionally.
it's significantly fewer units per acre than, and of course, and in DT5, that's, the intention there is to encourage multi-story development. So it'd be much more dense.
The DT5 will provide the mixed use, so it's not a single use there. So we have an opportunity to have retail, commercial, and residential. Of course, the R6 is a lower density, and I'm looking that up for you, and I'll get it to you in just a minute.
Well, and then just what, the height for DT5, up to 3 stories, 5 stories? What was the
Could go to 5.
5?
Can go up to 5 stories.
I think she's, I'm giving her time to find this. We have to go into a public hearing as well.
Should we go ahead? Should we go ahead and have the public hearing?
Yes,
We have 2 readings on this, right?
yes.
Yes.
So when is your closing set for?
January 17th.
So we would have a second reading before your closing?
Yeah.
January 13th is the
That's the
proposed
next meeting.
second reading.
Close, Brian.
And I didn't recall, while she's looking, I didn't recall seeing or reading the notes from the planning commission. Was there what was their discussion around this? Was it?
They asked about the current status of the property, and so that did come up. But other than that, there was very little additional comments. Brian was there. Jenny was there, and so there wasn't any additional public comment either. But that was the primary, just understanding the current condition of the property.
And a 5-0 vote indicated that there was no concern about the conditional nature of this rezoning?
There were not. There were none.
I do miss having the planning commission notes in our packet. I know that we tried to be,
Send them to me. That was my fault.
but I mean, we used to get like a verbatim transcript. I liked that,
Yeah, I did too.
so
Just 'cause
I
it
don't know
gave
why
more
we
flavor
moved
in the
to, right,
discussion.
right.
Well, as we sit here, we still have to open up a public hearing.
So moved.
Second,
And as we've heard all along, public hearing, you have 20 minutes to speak on this item, 10 per side. If you are in favor of this zoning change, please come forward and speak on behalf of being in favor of the zoning change. I guess that's right. That was a lot of words. Nobody's in favor of the zoning change. Anyone against the zoning change? No one is against the zoning change.
Mayor, I make a motion, we close public hearing.
All right. Do we have any other questions concerning this ordinance for the rezoning? Any other questions?
okay.
Well, I recommend a motion then.
Motion, we approve the ordinance to rezone the property.
Here a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any that oppose?
Nay.
One nay. Thank you. Number 10, ordinance to authorize the city manager to transfer scattered sites, property from the city of Spartanburg to the Commission of Public Works of the city of Spartanburg. First reading. Ordinance 2024-018. Presenter, Mr. Kohler.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. This is really a housekeeping matter. It's redeeding about 364 parcels of property scattered throughout the county from the name City of Spartanburg to the entity that actually is the water, Spartanburg Water. And that entity is actually the commissioners of the public works of the city of Spartanburg. So I tried to catch the flavor of the whole history in the ordinance, but in the late 19th century, waterworks began operating in Spartanburg. At some point, a private entity purchased it and ran it for a short time, and then the city got involved in it. And at some point, I think it was around the 20s, an entity known as the Commissioners of Public Works became the operators of the water system. They now are operated as Spartanburg Water, and they have actually two wings. They've got the sewer district and the water district under them. So in the 50s and 60s, when the water entity was acquiring all these parcels, the deeds were often prepared in the name of the city of Spartanburg, the commissioners of the city of Spartanburg, Spartanburg Water Works, a variety of different names. And so it's created some confusion for Spartanburg Water. The city doesn't have any interest in these parcels. They're not in the city. There's no tax base, and there's no benefit to us owning them. Spartanburg Water reached out to us and asked us if we'd help them clean up the deeds. They want to be certain that when they tell somebody they own a parcel, it's deeded properly in their name. The best example I can think of is we became aware that the city owns the dirt at the Lake Bowen boat ramp. We don't have any interest in that. We don't have any operation. We don't benefit from boat fees, and we have no interest in enforcing our rules out there at that because it's simply not reasonable for us to do that. So this is a housekeeping matter before you. If you approve the ordinance, we will then go through each and every deed. I and Spartanburg Waters hired an attorney from the Hainsworth firm, and we'll make sure it's appropriate for us to deed it over to them. We'll make sure it's not something we want to keep or should keep, and then if it clears that hurdle, the city manager will have the authority to sign the deed over and into the new name of the ownership. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. I'll be glad to answer any questions you have.
When did all this happen?
Sometime
era.
between the early 1900s, and I think one of the deeds I saw was deeded as late as the early 80s, maybe. So 40 years at best, going back to 100 years.
Well, errors can be made because my marriage license has been messed up, so.
I understand. Yeah, and I think there was some confusion
And I didn't
about
recognize it until this week.
what the entity that actually operated the water
I got Roland's
entity
birthday
was.
wrong.
Bob, are any of these 300 properties contiguous to the city?
I don't think so. It's a great question. As we go through them, that will be certainly, as we take them one by one, we'll look at if there's some value or benefit to us. And then we would probably fairly negotiate with Spartanburg Water to
Well, I
acquire
would just
it.
make sure we annex them into the city before we transfer them over so that we can have, potential acquisition, annexation strategy associated with any of those.
That's a great point. That'll be one of the checklist items, I think, to make sure that we're not missing out on some taxes, some ownership, some annexation, some reason to keep it in our house. But as I said, we'll go through them one by one. Tonight, I didn't want to bring them up to you 364 at a time. It just made sense to ask you to give the city manager
Thank you.
one blanket authority.
Nothing we want to keep? I mean,
Well, but there may be, again,
There may be some inside the city.
I hadn't gone through all 364.
City council boat dock, please.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, one question to that. I am a part of, a commissioner on but I guess I'm sewer. So I'm okay with voting
you're fine.
on this.
There's no pecuniary interest to you, so I don't see any conflict of interest for you.
Got you. Wanted to
and you're
make sure.
essentially our representative on that.
That's right.
True, correct, yeah.
Right.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we approve the ordinance to authorize the city manager to clean up the mess.
Second.
All in favor of cleaning up the mess?
Aye.
Any that oppose? Ayes have it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coleman. Okay, exciting news. Updates on Morgan Square enhancement plans. Information only, but we will get a clear picture of where we're headed. Mr. Story.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of
Clearer
council,
picture.
the misleading aspect of the title of update, this is a little bit more than the update because we're at a point now in the Morgan Square process to really ensure that this project is taking the shape you want it to take, and so that we can begin the implementation. As you know, you all appointed a committee of community leaders that spent the better part of a year and a half working on conceptual plans for the design of Morgan Square. And about this time last year, they presented those concept plans, and over the past year, those concept plans have made it to a more thorough engineered and planned design, which we'll review for you tonight. Also, over that time frame, we've developed a programming plan and an approach to ensuring that the public benefit that is motivating this project is realized in the form of more activity and programs and uses that touch more lives positively in the community and that help Morgan Square be the true heart of our downtown that we all hope it can be. So what we envision for the next few minutes is for Darren Meyer with MKSK, who's led the design effort to go through the design. Christopher George on our team's prepared to talk about programming. Then we'll talk a little bit about cost and scheduling, and then we'll talk about some potential expansions of the project scope. And then we'll seek your questions and direction with an eye towards, assuming you like everything you see in here tonight, move into formal action at your next meeting. So it's important tonight that we get through any questions that you may have. So with that, I'll turn the floor to Darren, unless I didn't cover anything you needed me to cover before you begin.
Sounds great.
Okay.
It's great to see everyone this evening. Darren Meyer with MKSK. I'm going to pick up where Mr. Story left off. So we did have a great experience working with you in the community over a year and a half in developing some ideas for the refresh of Morgan Square. And I wanted to fill in a little bit of what we've been doing since we left off with the development of that concept. So this timeline's a little bit small here, but there are a couple of categories of work that's been going on. So part of this has been some basic feasibility study that we need to do in order to complete the design and engineering drawings. So over the past months or year, and you may have seen some folks out there, we've been out there surveying the site in detail. We've done some subsurface work to identify where the utilities are. We've done some borings to understand, make sure that our foundations and our pavements can be supported from a geotechnical standpoint. We've had our arborist out there doing some air spading, which is a non-invasive way to look and see where roots are in trees, because we have a strong tree preservation plan. And we've done some updates to our estimate that have sort of accompanied all that feasibility work. Recently, in the past several weeks and month, we have reconnected with our steering committee, and we gave them an update on our progress. We have been to the DRB to share with them the architectural portion of this design. There's some architecture on Church Street, and we have met with business owners on multiple occasions, and I'll share with you some of what we've learned from them throughout the process. These images show renderings that we shared with you in August of 2023, so they should look somewhat familiar. We're looking here at the idea of a refresh of the square that really is much more inviting and accessible for people coming into the square and continuing to make it the heart of community events. There is some grade change on the square, so you have a slope from Church Street down to the west. So we're looking at the use of some terraces you see here in order to create some level spaces for daily use and for programming. And we have some ideas for some special treatment up on Church Street itself to really signal to the public that this is a special signature place in downtown Spartanburg. This is the plan as it stands today. So when we got through after a year and a half after our process with the steering committee and the community, there are 5 things that really emerged as themes that the community wanted to see with this space. I mentioned inviting and accessible. So from any direction coming into the square, how do we make this safe? How do we make it pedestrian first and pedestrian friendly? Green was a great sort of theme that came up in our conversations with the community, both shade during the hot parts of the summer, but also some green on the ground where you can spread out and have a blanket or relax. And also the idea that we wanted to have vibrant edges. So how does this space better engage with the businesses and support those businesses that are around the square? I mentioned that we are looking very carefully at tree preservation. So the trees that you see in green are the ones that we're preserving. There are 18 trees that we'll be preserving. And the size of those trees, as we look down on it from above, is the actual size of the canopy. So there's some great large-sized trees out there, and we think there's going to be, day one, the ability to keep the square cool and have some nice shade out there. In addition to that, we're planting 30 new trees. I do want to make a note that the trees that are along Main Street, so in the sidewalk in front of the Main Street businesses, we've had conversations with some of the property owners about those trees, and they're starting to create a little bit of liability for those businesses in terms of the roots and the branches there. We've had our arborist out looking at them, and he has some concerns. So among the trees that will be removed will be the trees right along the businesses on Main Street. We'll be replacing those with new street trees. They'll be a little bit further out, away from the buildings, and they'll be planted with a different approach that we use today than was done 20 years ago in terms of creating great soil volumes for the roots to grow and for those trees to thrive over time. I mentioned that we have some grade change out there, and this is exciting to us because we have the opportunity to create some really great sculptural terraces here. And I'll show you a few views of how these are taking shape. These are right at the heart of the square. And the idea is that these are the social heart of the square. So it's not just for sitting, it's for lounging, it's for children to climb. These are going to be made out of a great durable material, granite. So we're looking at how these can be fabricated and milled to create some soft edges. So if you're out there and you want to get a drink or a bite to eat in the evening, you can wear clothes that won't snag or get caught on the stone. Just very soft, beautiful forms, but with a great durable material. And that allows us to create these level lawn areas that I mentioned before for some of the programming and daily use. And you can see how some of those granite terraces create some nice seating around those as well. This is very small here. I apologize for the small size of these images, but in addition to the main features that I mentioned, we are looking comprehensively at the lighting and the site furnishings out there. So everything from the trash and recycling receptacles to the bike racks to seating. And particularly with seating, we're looking at lounging, so you can be out there and relax in the shade or in the sun. We have some benches with arms for those that need some extra support sitting down. And we even have some movable furniture up in the lawn, so you can slide those around. And then we have some typical, what you might think of as typical bistro table and chairs. So if you wanted to come out with a laptop or eat your lunch out there. So a wide range of ways to engage with the square and be comfortable. This is a critical piece. We do want to make sure that we provide space for outdoor dining along Main Street. One of the big challenges that we had as we got into this conversation with some city officials is that over the past several years with the tables for a fire lane. So what you see here is the idea that we are creating a zone that you see in blue for outdoor dining. Just above that in this view, that is the area that we're keeping clear for fire access. That'll also serve on a sort of daily or weekly or monthly basis. Any events that we have could be served for those uses. But the fire department connections are on the Main Street side, and we need to make sure that we have that clearance. So we're looking at how we can recreate those areas for outdoor dining and still maintain that access. The other note that I want to make is that daily traffic, vehicular traffic on a day-to-day basis, will continue to be closed on Main Street and also on Dunbar Street. So both of those streets will need fire access, but day-to-day vehicles will not be going through there. The other thing that we're doing is we're raising the street so that instead of a curb and parking spaces and asphalt in the street, this is all going to be one pavement material to, again, signal that this is a place for pedestrians first. This shows you a little bit of the view of some of the materials that we're considering. And the images above show some examples. We're looking at a clay brick material, so it's a great real masonry material. But we're looking at using some darker colors. Typically when you think of brick, you think of sort of the orange kind of hand molded brick. We're looking at using some darker colors here, which almost have a stone-like appearance. But that darker color also helps to hide wear. It ages a little bit more gracefully. So everything from spills that you might have during events to turning movements from the tires of vehicles, those are disguised much better with a darker palette of paving materials. So you can see some of those examples above. And we're still working through the exact mix of colors and the paving patterns for those. But this is a very high quality, durable material that will age very well over time. We have looked carefully and done a number of sun shade studies in the square to inform just thermal comfort and where we put seating, but also for our approach to planting. I've shown two examples here of planting. The one on the right represents the approach that we're going to take on Morgan Square. Sometimes what you see on the left is the idea that we get some shrubs out there and there's a lot of mulch between them for a lot of years until they finally grow together. We're looking at using much more faster growing ornamental grasses and perennials. We have a palette that is 100% native plant material now, and we're in the process of working with city staff to talk about the maintenance of those over time, which is not as difficult as it may seem. But the goal is to get to that image on the right where these fill in and have beautiful floral displays throughout the year. And you can see some of the plant material that we're considering here. And then lastly, I wanted to share with you our approach to the Church Street edge. So today, if you can picture the square along Church Street, you have some large evergreen magnolia trees, and they've served as a backdrop for when you have events and concerts there. But also, they really block for pedestrians and motorists the views into the square. So if you're coming up Church Street from either direction or coming from East Main, there's very little cue or very little signal that this is a great public space, a signature public space in the heart of Spartanburg. So what we want to do is we're going to remove those evergreen trees. We're going to replant some deciduous trees along the street there. So there will be a buffer between Church Street and the square, so it won't be easy for children or other folks to move out into the street. But we also want to have some great iconic architecture up on the Church Street. So not only do we want to create views in, but we really want to create a special moment there and have it serve a functional purpose. So we know that restrooms are critical from our conversations with the community. So if you're out there with your family, we want to be able to have comfort facilities where they can use the restrooms. So we have those provided. We're looking at storage, which sounds like a little bit of a sort of pedestrian type of use for these buildings. But when Christopher shares with you the ideas for programming, we need to have the ability to have some space to support that day-to-day programming out on the square. And I'm very excited that we have the presence of a visitor center out there, or a visitor kiosk, where we'll have the staff and have the ability to really welcome people to the square and have that beacon for them. So you can see the views here. When we shared this with the DRB, what we expressed to them through this design process that was guided by the community, this is not infill office building or retail building on Main Street or Church Street. This is a different approach entirely. These are sculptural, architectural pieces within a public space. They're intentionally kept very small. We broke them into 3 volumes underneath so that you can see through them, you can get through them. And we've also looked at ways that we can use some super graphics or some branding. These, where you see the S and the Hub City, aren't necessarily finalized, but they give you the sense of what we can do to help really signal, again, that this is a great public civic space. So here you see on the left side the visitor kiosk, which will have a lot of glass and glow at night. And then the other volumes you can see from the square, and really a great sort of 18-hour effect from this, both during the day and in the evening. In terms of materials, we have a great palette of materials for that. So we're looking at real materials, everything from copper and wood for some of the accents to the great glazing that you see, thinking about nano walls so that building, those are the ones that sort of fold open completely so it could be open air for that visitor kiosk. So it's going to be very high quality palette of materials. All right, Christopher.
Good evening. So concurrent with the design process that Darren was just talking about, we engaged with, I think I just killed the whole thing. There we go. We engaged with Biederman Redevelopment Ventures on a programming plan for the square. Here you can see kind of an overlay of the programmable space of the square itself, and you can see we've got fit lots of folks into different areas here, and that'll play into the rest of the programming I'm going to talk about. So Biederman Redevelopment Ventures, they are primarily known for redevelopment of Bryant Park in New York, which was back in the 80s apparently a terrible place to be in Midtown, and now is a bustling hub of activity that's really become a model for the rest of the country. They have created programming plans based on that Bryant Park model for communities all over the country. Some of their work that's close to home, Cary, North Carolina has a downtown park that they did. There's High Street Park in Dunwoody, Georgia, and LeBauer Park in Greensboro, which I've visited, is a very nice park in downtown Greensboro that's very well programmed. They, of course, as you can see here, completed the programming plan for us in December of last year. So the vision for the plan was to entice residents to come to and remain at Morgan Square. That's dwell time, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. Appeal to a wide range of demographics and interests and attract new audiences from surrounding areas. So we want to build on what the square currently has and draw new folks in, city residents, folks from outside the city who may not come to Morgan Square frequently. We want to give them a reason to come to the new Morgan Square. Increased dwell time, make Morgan Square a viable third place. So some of you may not be familiar with the notion of a third place. So your home is your first place, your work is your second place, and a third place is any other place where you gather. This is a church for some folks, this could be a coffee shop. Morgan Square, our vision for it is to become a third place. Some of the oldest third places in human history were town squares. And so the way you do that is you create a space that attracts people not just during large-scale events, but during the rest of the year as well. And so that you do that obviously by activating it during all times and all days of the week and at different times of the day as well. So the programming approach, think small. One of the first things that BRV said to us was that many municipalities put a lot of emphasis and effort and resources into their large-scale events and not nearly as much towards daily programming. So they tend to focus, as we have in the past, on events that draw in hundreds or thousands of folks and not the sorts of things that might draw in a couple of dozen on a day-to-day basis. So that actually has the effect of creating a sort of boom and bust cycle. So you see that on Morgan Square now. If we have, or someone else has, an event planned, it's full of people, or if the weather's very nice, it's full of folks out there enjoying the space. But other times of day, you don't really see a lot of activity. You don't see the space getting much use. That's because it's not being actively programmed during those times. Folks don't have a reason to come out to the space. So the way you do that is by finding and developing programming partners. At the outset of this process, we provided a list of potential partners to BRV. They also did some research on their own. And we have a list of folks that we're going to be reaching out to build that plan. They have a suggested list for us as well. And so part of what will be going on while the square is under construction is building out the actual programming schedule itself. And, you know, and also balancing special events with daily programming. Another thing that they recommended to us was that just because you have an event that might take up, you know, a significant portion of the top of the square or something, doesn't mean you necessarily have to cancel everything else. So if you've got some sort of smaller scale exercise class or something to that effect, well, you can have that at a different part of the square at the same time. You don't have to, you know, and that's the advantage of having those different spaces. So you can balance your larger events with your programming and not have to necessarily cancel that programming too. So amenities, this was part of that increasing dwell time I was talking about. This allows for unstructured use. So folks just show up, and at Morgan Square we will have movable tables, chairs, umbrellas. Darren spent some time talking about that. The idea is that folks could move their seating to where there's shade or wherever they're comfortable or wherever is pleasant. There's also going to be some obvious, you know, fixed seating that's around as well. Simple things like a games cart. So just, you know, cards and board games, things you could check out from the visitor kiosk, which will be staffed, be available to folks. A reading room. This is something that the folks at BRV have had great success with in a lot of their parks. It's just what it sounds like, what you see on the image there. It's just essentially a cart. It's got periodicals and books in it. We have some great partners we can work with to make sure that that's stocked. And that is wheeled out from the storage area every day, and it's there for folks to use. An arts and crafts cart. This would probably be geared towards children. Another opportunity for some partnership there. Just again, activities that encourage you to come to the square without an agenda. You didn't necessarily know what was even going to be happening. You just know that if you go to Morgan Square, there's a pleasant place to hang out and there'd be stuff for you to do. And that goes for the ping pong tables and lawn games and things of that sort as well. And our Parks and Rec department already has like really great success with lawn games and this sort of thing, so we can definitely incorporate that kind of thing into the square. Programming recommendation examples. So this is some examples I've put into a few buckets of programming that BRV has recommended. Family and dog owner programming, they've seen great success with this in other cities. Obviously, folks with small children are looking for things to do, but also dog owners are constantly, and that's our own experience as well. Dog owners always are looking for some sort of event or something to do with their pup, right? So same with children. Some of us have little four-legged furry children, and some of us have actual children. Fitness and wellness programming. So obviously exercise classes, maybe a run club, mindfulness or meditation. This gives us an opportunity to reach out to some of those businesses we have downtown and seek to partner there. We've had some classes like that in the past on Morgan Square. It's just never been structured the way it would be under this plan. Arts and culture programming. This is going to be a slam dunk because we have so much to offer in arts and culture in Spartanburg and so many great organizations to partner with. You know, everything from smaller musical performances that, you know, you think about the success that Chapman has had with the Buskers and maybe some sort of smaller scale music performances. It's also an opportunity to partner with downtown businesses on those smaller scale music performances. Author talks. Right now, there are a ton of those that happen down at Hub City Bookshops. There's some more that happen at the library. There's opportunities there to bring some of those out to Morgan Square when the weather's nice in particular. Art classes, history lectures, trivia nights, all of these are really easy to put together with the right partners. And we've definitely got them here. We have a lot of folks in our arts and culture community that are constantly reaching out to us about opportunities to partner, looking for ways that they can get outside their four walls. It's something we hear all the time. And, you know, Morgan Square can be an opportunity for them to do that. Measuring success. So this will be particularly important during the first year. People counts at various times of the day. So we can sort of decide how we might want to tweak our schedule. We need to do it at the same time to ensure we've got consistency in our data. Same thing for attendance counts at every program. That lets us know what's working, what we may need to change. And, you know, that sometimes those attendance counts, you know, you get 25 at an event, and that might actually be what you wanted. So it'll depend, that's very event dependent. Surveys, we'll have opportunities to have that available at the visitor center just routinely, and we can also do it for specific events whenever we'd like. It'd be very nice to have that throughout different periods of the year, maybe quarterly we had been thinking. Just to, and especially as we're building out year 2 and 3 of this programming model, seeing what worked well during that first year is going to be so critical. And lastly, operations recommendations. Now, BRV in different communities will recommend different types of operations arrangements. For us, they recommended that we should manage the square directly and should consider creating a sub-department to encompass the square's programming and operations with a programming manager, a programming coordinator, and 1 to 2 potentially part-time programming assistants. And that would perhaps grow in year 2 depending on, well, 1 to 2 is there because it might grow in the second year. And that is it for me, and I believe I'm handing it over to Chris.
Okay. Thank y'all. Wanted to talk a little bit about the original footprint that we ask this committee to undertake, and some opportunities that we think make sense as downtown has evolved. As you might recall, when we began the Morgan Square project, that committee began working, there hadn't been the announcement of Project Core and the $425 million of investment to include the stadium and 300+ million of private development, which includes a redevelopment of the Herald Journal block and other things. So the ability to connect Morgan Square to all of the exciting activity to the west is an opportunity that emerged as we undertook this process. So I want you to, this graphic is intended to sort of illustrate 3 zones that you can think of. The first to the right, you see the yellow dashed outline that is bounded by Dunbar Street to the north, Main Street to the south, Church Street to the east, and Wall and Magnolia to the west. That's the original footprint of the project. That's the committee and Darren and his team had studied and evaluated. That the scope of that endeavor, as currently designed, is a $15 million undertaking. The center section, which goes from Wall and Magnolia 1 block west to Spring Street, that goes through is a second section that is outside the original scope, but we believe functions more naturally as an extension of the square proper. As I've previously recommended to you, we recommend the relocation or retreatment of the area currently occupied by the clock tower. We believe that a conventional intersection at the intersection of Main and Spring is going to be better for all involved for a couple of reasons. One, the current intersection has to be signalized because of the very large island. By bringing it into a smaller intersection, we can make it much more cohesive pedestrian environment from Daniel Morgan Avenue all the way into the heart of the square, with much larger sidewalks and much more coherent straight line there. That smaller intersection is much easier for pedestrians to cross. It's much tighter. May even be done with a simple 4-way stop, which would be better for everybody involved. The other thing that change does is it allows the new building frontages on the south, which are going to be exciting components of our downtown vision, part of that $425 million undertaking that will be significant activity generators for our downtown. It allows the front facades of those to align with the historic form of our downtown, which connects the AC Hotel to the historic structures of the square with one cohesive Main Street building line. So there's several advantages to incorporating that second section into this work, and we recommend you do so. And then the third section there directly in front of the Herald Journal block, that's where we can keep some on-street parking, probably have very minimal amount of surface changes, but keep some of the furniture and attributes so it's a sort of a cohesive experience for the pedestrian that might move from the ballpark of the AC Hotel down Main into the heart of the square. And so that's what we are recommending to you at this time, is that the primary building materials of the square itself would be extended that small block further. Now that center block will be open to vehicles. The vehicle flow patterns are not proposed to change. except for the improvements of the Spring and Main intersection, you'll be able to travel the same pathways as you currently travel. It's important to us to bring in vehicles from the west side to direct side of the Daniel Morgan statue so they can make that left and go down Magnolia Street in the Magnolia Street garage. And so people can come up, can come south on Magnolia Street to Main Street and take a right to move out. So the vehicle routes that exist today are proposed to change. The only difference is some realignment and some simplification of that and some extension of the treatment, the aesthetic treatment of the square a block further west. And I hope I'm making that clear. That'll take our project cost up to about $17 million, which we think is achievable given that we have a debt issuance now currently funded by our hospitality tax that would be expiring next year. That creates some capacity, and you could consider in the first quarter of next year authorization of bond mechanism that could be sized to meet those obligations. Couple of things to add to that as we think about connecting the square westward. We believe we've developed a plan that is tied to the history of how the clock tower came to be in this community, and what it is and what it was originally. Very much appropriate to honor the history of that, so we will not lose that element as a icon and feature component of our community. And I look forward to being able to share more details with you all about that in January. But I don't want anyone to hear this discussion and think that history is being disregarded. It certainly is not. Other key points I was to cover about the westward movement?
I think that's it on west. We just want to touch on schedule.
Yeah. The key points about scheduling are, we believe that the project itself is a 10-month hard construction phase. We are currently working with a contractor that's been procured that has done a number of similar projects. We selected to negotiate with them because of their significant experience in dealing with Main Street business front door type circumstances. They have done many of the most pedestrian-oriented center pedestrian zones in communities across the South, and we think they're well suited to do this. Their experience with the dynamics that can come based on weather, what might be work just fine on a Tuesday morning would be totally unacceptable at happy hour on a Friday night when restaurant traffic is flowing in. They're accustomed to that experience, that they understand how sensitive it is to operate at the front door of businesses. So we're working with them now on time frame. We think it's about a 10-month heavy construction time. Now, if you think about that 10-month and apply it to a calendar, that means one of the key periods of sensitivity, we're going to have the bulk of the square offline. We had originally thought that it made sense to start that 10-month period in January and hopefully have everything wrapped up by the Christmas shopping season, the holiday season. We thought that would be the optimal. But in our meetings with some of the businesses on the square, they have suggested to us that perhaps the optimal time for events and activities and outdoor dining of the spring is more important to preserve that. So they have recommended to us that it would be in the collective interest to begin construction in the late spring, early summer of this year. Again, we're doing this for the purposes of furthering economic development in the heart of our city and creating a destination to maximize that. So we respect that logic and certainly seek your direction on which you think is better. But we are inclined to think we could execute very well by beginning construction in the late spring or early summer. That would also give us time to finalize the design of that center block and the curb lines on that western block, and to source some of the granite materials, which we might be able to achieve at better pricing with a little more lead time. So there's several advantages to prioritizing the spring event and outdoor dining season. So we are leaning in that direction at this moment. Within that 10-month time frame, I want to be clear, though, that it's our intention to preserve pedestrian access to the front doors of the businesses throughout. And it's also our intention to bring back on the expanded large sidewalk outdoor dining areas as quickly as possible. The part that we know will take the longest time frame is the heart of the square, right? The center portion where you might have a big event and that kind of thing. That's offline for 10 months, we think, best case scenario, the center portion of the square. But we would like to, but we believe we can phase and structure the work so that there would be sidewalks and outdoor dining areas would be offline for a shorter period of time than that, if that makes sense. Anything you need to correct or amend of that, either of you guys? All right, well, why don't we pause and see what questions or thoughts?
Questions,
Yes, sir.
thoughts?
I'll
Sir.
go.
Right.
Can we go back to the aerial of the square overlaid on the existing conditions?
Just actually, the end of that, easement still right after the slide you're on, go one more. Yeah. Is that what?
No, I don't need the whole, all the way. I'm just talking about the square itself, not extended all the way to Daniel Morgan. Yeah. So, couple questions, comments. This is obviously a little bit different than what we've seen previously. First question is outdoor dining. When the genesis of all this was COVID, and we saw the activation of the square with outdoor dining, and we decided we liked it, and we kept and this is my impression, y'all may disagree, we're all here, but we kept the Main Street closed. And then that turned into, okay, what else could we do with the square? It looks to me like this restricts outdoor dining back to where it was before we did all this work of shutting down Main Street, liking it. So that, I don't know, and this is just an opinion, others may have difference. I don't like going back away from the outdoor dining that we thought caused us in the first place to want to shut down Main Street. And even with the outdoor dining that this shows, there's like a buffer area, I think, with benches that restricts it even further between the outdoor dining and what was once Main Street. So that would be issue number one on my end. I've got two others, but you want me to talk through all three issues, or you want to?
Happy to do either way.
So I'll go talk through all three. That's the first one. The second issue I have is with the design of the buildings. Do you want to flip to that, Chris? And again, this is purely a matter of opinion, but I'm going to have to vote, so I better share my opinions. No, you're good. And others may completely disagree with these opinions, and that's fine. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer here. So we have in my mind, very historical downtown with kind of red brick historical buildings. This is a cool looking structure, but it's very modern. I don't know how that's gonna age. My concern would be, how does that age in comparison to a more historic downtown, like a modern building? Does it match? And I could be wrong here, but this is just an opinion off the cuff. I don't know that this building fits with the historic downtown. And that kind of goes along with the islands and the rocks surrounding them. My concern there, and I know that this is where the committee has ended up, and we asked the committee to do this, but is that going to age well, those rocks? And it's a really cool, feels more modern, and it might be a great counterpoint to downtown, but my concern is, how does that age in a historic downtown square? So I guess the second two are just opinions I'm sharing. The first question is, this was driven by outdoor dining, and now we're restricting it. Why?
Okay. Two things about that, and I'll ask Darren to give his thoughts as well. One of the objectives, one of the design constraints, if you will, was attempting to have a design that could work if a future council said, we want you guys to pull the bollards up and let vehicles flow on Main Street.
Sure.
So we wanted to have.
And I agree with that, yeah.
The physical hardscape allow for that. And so that's why you see the banding that you do see there, that is sort of forms that southern edge, so that the pieces, so that there could be two travel lanes if we wanted to pull up the bollards. The second thing that I would say related to that is we wanted to create a condition where there was logical visual cues for where the outdoor dining area should be. And so the other thing that band does from a design perspective is it tells pedestrians and event attendees that you've got free reign in the space outside of that, but the banding that you see there sort of defines that beyond that is an outdoor dining space, or to the south of that is outdoor dining space. We have done a significant amount of counts. You see the square footages there. Those are, as you see here, based on building frontage, right? But building frontage is only one aspect of this. We want an active square. There are some of the structures on the square that don't have a potential active use of that outdoor dining zone. So that is additional square footage that could be for outdoor dining. An example would be, you see J and K and L there to the right. Well, K has a larger building frontage, but it's an office building. It's an office use. There's nothing prohibiting that space in front of K to be additional outdoor dining, which raises the table count that's available and the seating capacity that's available. So there's a couple things that make us feel a little bit more comfortable with that. In fact, we are at an outdoor dining count that is significantly greater than it was pre-COVID, but also in line with what would keep us having a safe and functional long-term option with or without through vehicles. So we're trying to strike the right balance with that. And the final comment I would add is that what we're talking about here is finalizing a hardscape. It is also possible for the furnishings and the utilization of some of these spaces to evolve over time. You see, we're adding some seating capacity areas that don't exist today, and some table seating that would be collective and open. In other words, the space can evolve, but the hardscape needs to be really well planned. And we think that the overall count is consistent with what we would consider to be emphasizing outdoor dining, not diminishing it, but again. those
Well,
are
Chris,
questions.
where it says 108 tables for 2024, is that 108 with this plan or 108 how it looks right now as we speak?
That's,
108 with this plan, but the important asterisk to make there is that these 108 tables are not allocated in front of the same businesses as you would see today with the street closure. So the tables and chairs that are proposed now take the place of where you have angled parking today, where some of the street trees that we mentioned are being removed. So there's a little bit more real estate, but to your point, yes, it's definitely pulling in from the condition that's out there today.
To that point, staying with the seating, what is the barrier that's hindering me that I couldn't walk out to some of the other chairs? What barrier will be in place when I leave the restaurant? I want to go out to the middle of the square, not just sit in front of the restaurant. What?
no vertical barrier.
No, that's what I want to.
And there's one other thing I failed to mention there is we think that the physical space that is proposed is more usable than the same dimension is today because of how the trees are to be situated and sited. And so the square footage numbers you see there are not just the total square footage there. That's a usable dining area that doesn't have tree grates in it, doesn't have tree trunks in it. The trees would be situated out near the band that you see to the north of the colored area, if I'm explaining that well, and so that they can be laid out for seating in a much more dense and way than the current with the trees as they're currently configured.
So it looks like there's a 4-foot pedestrian zone, a 14-foot dining zone, which is like maybe me to Megan, or maybe a little less, maybe me to Jamie. And then what is that, a 7-foot or 6-foot buffer zone before you get to what was Main Street?
Yeah, it's a little hard to see. We have a small zone right in the face of the building where you might have a sandwich board or an advertisement for your business, or you could have some 2 top tables. And then we have a clear zone for pedestrian path for access to those businesses, and then the 14 feet.
And then how big is that buffer zone between the Main Street and the outdoor dining? That looks like it's half of the outdoor dining zone. So
That's
maybe
about right, yeah,
7 feet.
about 7 feet, correct.
I don't understand why we wouldn't extend the outdoor dining zone I don't understand the purpose of that buffer zone unless Main Street's operating. Then you would need a buffer zone, but we don't plan for Main Street to be operating. So why do we have a 7-foot buffer zone to an inoperative Main Street?
It's a great question for council. I think the intent was that one of the things we wanted to do when Main Street is closed to daily traffic is be able to encourage people to be able to move north-south, to your point, Mayor, from the businesses into the square, as well as east-west along the street. And so that gives us a little bit of space that's dedicated to movement through there, but that could also be real estate that's available for outdoor dining as well.
The whole thing is tough for me because this drove our decision was wanting to do this and seeing really we wanted it to be temporary. And then we were like, man, this is activating the square. Let's keep it. And now we're saying, oh, we don't want it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Rob's thought there, and it's been a concern that I've had all along in this process. I mean, I understand that we may not end up with the same amount of capacity for outdoor seating, for certain businesses along the square, but in total, we were doing this to further energize and inject people into the square, and outdoor dining does a lot of that. I mean, walk out on the square on a beautiful, Friday afternoon at lunchtime, and the outdoor seats are, well populated. You do it on a rainy, Monday afternoon, and there's nobody out there. So
in the winter, yeah.
And so, I mean, I think having that capacity will be critically important for the lifeblood of the square. So, if if the plan would be to approve that amount of limited seating just as a hard stop, I think that'd be a tougher get in terms of a majority. I think if the idea is to create flexibility that allows for our thriving businesses to have adequate seating in the square, then I think we would all be in alignment with that. At least I would.
Sorry, still going?
Yeah, well, I was. I'll get back.
Well, on a design point, you showed the bricks, and is the thought that blue band would be a certain pattern, and then the pedestrian walkway, and then what's beyond the blue band being a different one, so that your mind is seeing this as a certain spot?
Yes and no. One of the things we wanted to do was to try and get rid of the idea of sidewalk, street, and square, because we can flow better. But I think Mr. Story mentioned earlier, with the use of the trees and the lighting and some of the paving bands, that's a little bit of cue, on a busy day when there's a lot of people publicly out on the square, they're not sort of, interrupting the business that would happen in outdoor dining and vice versa. So the paving itself, the field, would probably be consistent with what's, in the square, but then we have some of the accent bands and some of the public furniture and the trees that would create a little bit of that visual cue.
So maybe what we're talking about is more of a programming decision than it is a design decision. Am I right? Because to the mayor's point, there's not going to be a wall or a bench or anything preventing you from leaving the last table to entering into the square, correct?
Correct.
So if Delaney's wanted to do their shenanigans, or Mezcal wanted to do Cinco de Mayo, they could work with the programming team to increase capacity for a particular event or night, and that would be more of a programming decision than a design decision. Is that
correct?
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, I think we're designing a dining zone, and I just don't think it's enough.
Well, to your point too, Rob, part of us funding the baseball stadium is hospitality tax. So why would we remove outdoor dining, which pays for the hospitality tax towards the baseball stadium? I mean, that doesn't make sense to me. You're creating less dining outside, which means our restaurants who pay a pretty significant amount of hospitality tax annually will, in my mind, would decrease because there's less seating.
And also, I mean, they would benefit from any events on the square. If there was a musical act, for example, like for Music on Main, the restaurants and bars along Morgan Square do really well because people are outside enjoying those restaurants, but also whatever programming is in the square. So I think that's a real concern that we need to make sure we clearly understand before we get to a vote on this. And I also agree with Rob's concern about what appears to me to be a more contemporary design versus, what, around it is a more classic design. And I just want to make sure that, when we invest $17 million, that we're putting something out as a product that is timeless and will sustain, itself over time. A couple other questions I had, as we think about measurement of success, and I appreciate all the metrics that Christopher showed us, but we've got to make sure that we have business success as part of that metrics, because when we have done design changes to our square or our downtown area in the past, some have worked very well, others have been colossal failures, and it ruined our downtown for more than a generation. So ultimately, to me, to have an active public square is hand in hand with success of our retail and restaurant and business community. So I want to make sure that we put that out there. The other thing, Chris, you talked about timeline of implementation. There is the front-facing timeline on the square, but also we're running up, I would imagine soon, with a lot of changes along Broad Street with Project WRAP and the city-county complex and the, associated developments. And so, how does that timeline, interact with the timeline of the changes we're talking about in the square? Because what I don't want to do is choke our businesses in the front and the back at the same time.
Same time. Yes, sir. And I think the big variable about that is the city hall parking lot, that I know a lot of these same businesses get, use and depend on. We believe that we're going to be able to aggressively communicate some campaigns and efforts to help folks understand the convenience of our parking garages. We've got also a new parking garage coming online that will relieve, and sometimes it becomes like zone defense, that some parkers move around to keep overall capacity. But we believe that the City Hall parking lot remains open through this spring and into the summer. And that we'll be working on a number of efforts with One Spartanburg and others to communicate and support, facilitate business access when that parking lot does become a construction site. We'll have a more detailed construction schedule at your, I believe it's your January meeting, where we've discussed possibly having a joint meeting with county council to talk about that project, and it's maybe that's the second meeting in January. We'll know more about that timeline. But I think we're very much aware that people need to be able to get to the front doors and the back doors, and they need parking access as well.
And Chris, I want to make sure I clearly understood. Magnolia Street will not close to vehicular traffic.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Because on both ends, it will have an
That's
exit and a, okay.
That is correct. It'll be as it is today in terms of traffic flow. It'll look a little bit different, but your traffic flow will be the same.
And in terms of programming, Christopher, you mentioned 5 new FTEs being contemplated as part of, or 3 FTEs and maybe 1-2 part-time folks. Do we have, with not only with the head count, but also the programming, do we have an idea of what the ongoing annual obligation for a budget to program downtown will be?
Well, we think having our current financial model has a new city outlay toward that of $150,000 a year.
That seems light.
Well, that's to cover staff.
Current.
No, that's to cover the staffing cost of the attendance on the site. And then we're working with community partners and others to try to put together a comprehensive programming schedule that would involve some privately sponsored and some publicly sponsored events. So.
Councilman Brown.
Back to programming, just so I understand, this discussion has always been about, as Rob had mentioned, increasing outdoor dining and really truly making the square programmable. I'm excited about the idea of new things that we don't typically do. You'd mentioned yoga on the square, exercise classes and things like that. But what I hope that we are not thinking about doing is moving some of our larger scale events to the baseball stadium. I understand while under construction, we'll probably have to migrate certain events. But I know, you have, the Brew Fest, the Hog Fest, all those types of events. I see all these people that come to these events and then they go from there, into the restaurants or the retail spaces. And I know that when this discussion was presented to the community, it was about increasing programming, not taking anything away. And so I want to be, at least from my opinion, very clear about what my expectations are. And that is that we are not moving and migrating events. My hope is the baseball stadium and who they'll be working with, larger concerts, things, baseball games and things of that nature. You know, I've seen how they do the festival and the Brew Fest in Greenville at their stadium there, and it just looks so tiny. You know, you have a huge stadium, and then you have these people in this large, I like the idea of not only with density and housing, but density with people. And so I hope that that is something that we continue to do, is that we're truly making Morgan Square a place where people want to come, and not removing events just to be a space filler at the baseball stadium. And I think that that's really important. I mean, I don't know what kind of conversations have been had with our businesses, you know, on the square and restaurants and their concerns about those things, but we really need to be considerate of, you know, how they're feeling about those types of, because I think there's a sense of fear, because there have been discussions about, well, we're gonna program the square, but there'll be yoga and whatnot, but we're gonna move some of the larger events down to the baseball stadium. And I think it would be misleading, because the original conversations that were presented to us as a council, to business owners, to restaurants, and to the community, the public at large, have always been about increasing what we do in Morgan Square.
To that point, go ahead.
I just would add that I think there may be, in the time that there is some construction,
Correct.
some one-off type of
Yes.
things, but we don't, the city doesn't control the use of the stadium for special events. So we can't choose to move a special event into the stadium. That would be dependent on their ability and cooperation and their intention, and they would have needs and concerns about that as well. So I don't want to give the impression that it would be the city's choice to do that, and that we wouldn't be the initiator to do that. We believe that the square is the center of daily and weekly life in downtown Spartanburg, and that's what we want to set it up to be. And it's been a great venue and it is the sort of default center for fun and activity, and I think that's going to continue to be the case, and I certainly hear you on that. We will ask our partners at the stadium to help us through some of the construction time, so we don't lose momentum with a very small list of privately sponsored special events, potentially. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But that would be a 1 year.
I was just gonna mention the communication with the downtown business owners and restaurants and retail. We've had several, I say several, but there's been conversation with those partners as well, and we do feel that they are partners in this endeavor.
Absolutely, and they are, this whole thing works symbiotically. If it, that's got to be the goal. That's got to be everyone's goal.
Mr. Mayor? Two questions related to the programming, but first I'll disagree with my two colleagues. I really like the pavilion. I think it offers something different, and cities I've been to that have different architectures seem more interesting. I like the slope, feels like, we went with the water theme, and I see that there, so I like that. I think I saw it on Christopher's slide rather than the first, but if we're thinking of a stage like a Music on Main, before that has butted up against Church Street, but on Christopher's slide, it looked like maybe it was in front of One Morgan Square.
With there.
Or what, maybe the question is, what are we thinking about that?
There are multiple configurations that could work. One is illustrated here, but I think in the more expanded deck, you had multiple different configurations. Obviously, the covered portion of the pavilion provides a space from which you could have some live music that would basically be similar to the orientation today. You know, you'd have, the band would face west, the performer would face west. This particular example shows a stage that would face south. And so it's intended to have multiple options. You see there's another little outline in the lower grass lawn that could be a focal point for a performance there. What else
Is that blue triangle right in front of where it says Dunbar Street? What is that?
That's showing where a stage could be.
Oh, it is,
And,
okay,
and so it's a flat area,
okay.
where a stage could be, depending on, you know, what the size of the crowd anticipated and that kind of thing.
A
Up
flat
to and
stage?
include- What's that?
A flat stage, not a raised stage?
No, it's a flat area on which you could put a stage.
Oh, you're saying bring one
There wouldn't
in?
be a stage there.
Right, there wouldn't be a stage there on a Tuesday.
So let me
but
just
it
ask a
would-
practical question along those lines. Where would Music on Main be?
I think that would be, I mean, I don't know if, probably at the top of the square is it?
Under the shell.
Yes.
All right, so design aside, and I don't dislike it, it's just whether or not
Well,
it
I
fits.
don't like
But,
it.
how would the acoustics be in a shell like that?
So one of the things that we're doing with this view is we use this as a conversation starter to talk to event staff, because we've got to make sure we've got the infrastructure to support whatever events are there. And we're trying to provide infrastructure that anticipates all different types of events, whether it's music performances or whether it's the major annual events that happen. So this starts to look at where different locations could be. So different size music performances, different size stage. So the one that you asked about in front of the Dunbar Street label, you could use Dunbar Street to help stage that. So you could have some vehicles come in, you could set up a temporary stage. You could use the terrace seating for that event. So you've got some natural seating built in, you know, so there could be a little bit of a larger performance there, whereas you know, sort of slightly smaller than that could be on the upper lawn, and then a little smaller could be on the lower lawn. So you can have different size venues. But really, this was a conversation starter to make sure that whether it's power, whether it's potable water, you know, whether it's the temporary facilities to set up a stage, that we have those accommodated. So we're still sort of working through that, which way you look, how the acoustics are, how it affects the Main Street businesses. Those are still issues that we're sort of working through with event staff.
Two other quick questions. Did we scrap the water feature?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
I think I
Thank
was the only one
goodness.
that liked that. And then second, last question, maybe is for Christopher. I think it's clear that there are many opinions on not just the design, but on the programming. Are we looking at engaging some sort of advisory council moving forward that might help guide the thoughts and making sure everyone's,
That has been talked about, I'll let Chris answer that.
okay?
Yeah,
Okay, Chris,
we can't do the programming alone. We need partners to do it right. And we need to have, you know, shared calendars and policies that make clear, you know, because a lot of the businesses on the square provide a lot of programming right now. They do it for their own, you know, business purposes, but it has secondary benefits, right? Live music, you know, the next time you go to the square, there might be some outdoor live music, and it might be purely a function of Delaney's or one of the other businesses there doing that for their patrons, but it adds to the whole scene, and folks that hang out in the square are listening as well.
And that won't change necessarily.
No, that's, if anything, the message to those folks who are carrying that load right now is that we intend to be more engaged and more helpful to that, so.
Yeah, Chris, on Christopher's slide, under amenities that he was showing, it was okay, games and different things that were there. I would think that if we're going to have something like that, well then, are you going to need a person that's going to go behind the kids and pick up all of this stuff? Are we going to be hiring somebody for that? You know, got to go behind, got to make sure that all of that stuff, got the games and got
Yes.
different things are picked up, because you can put back in these little,
Yes, ma'am. And our intent is to have the Welcome Center staffed in most, in most of the hours of the week. I'm not talking about 24 hours a day, but I'm talking about midday through the evening, have someone who is there that is based out of that welcome facility, but out on foot across the square, tending to making sure it's orderly, making sure it's that things are working and supporting the program.
and do we need the amenities though? Do we need that, Christopher? Would you really recommend that? The amenities?
Yes, ma'am. I think the idea behind their BRV's recommendations for the staff that they recommended was the idea that they would maintain those things that needed to be taken in to storage at night, and that they would be responsible for following up with folks who checked out games and things like that. That's why it had, 3 to 4 staff members recommended.
Okay, now one other question. The restaurants that would be in the square, the ones that would have seating in the square, are those seatings reserved for one particular restaurant? I don't mean one particular one. Each one can reserve their seating, or I can just go and choose a seat. If I go and get a meal to eat, well, I can go out there and sit, go wherever I want to sit.
We envision it would be very similar to it where it is today, that there would be an understanding and an agreement with the restaurants that if they're going to engage in outdoor dining service on the square, that they would be a specified set of tables that they serve, that they manage, that they bus, they do those kind of things. Now, in the center of the square, there will be additional furniture, but that would be available for you to come out with your own bag lunch and your own laptop and do whatever you would like there. But the dining that would be closest to the fronts of the businesses on the square would be staffed and monitored and supported by the restaurants themselves, just as it is today.
Or would there reserved seating now for dining? Because I've never gone there just to eat. Are there reserved seatings for certain restaurants?
Yes.
Which ones are they?
Well, all of the dining on the square today is
They
associated
all?
with the.
Oh,
So, but they won't have a barrier, or will they have a barrier and say, this is Sophia's and this is Delaney's?
Yes, it will be, there will be visual cues that make it clear and tabletop indicators so that there won't be confusion about that.
Okay.
Will there be a style guide for the furniture?
Yes, we are working on that to make sure. That's one of the comments we've heard today through this process. One of the things that it's been a good while, but there were a number of public events to give input into the design process, and there was survey work to give input in the design process. And one of the things we heard about outdoor dining was that it should be more orderly than it is today, and more designed than it is, more defined than it is today. People like it, but just because people like something doesn't mean that they don't want to see enhancements to it and improvements. And some of the enhancements that came consistently through the public feedback was, define a clear area and have some cohesiveness to how the appearance is.
And Chris, the restrooms in the visitor center, they will only be open when there is staff present.
That's correct. That's very important. Just those, it's one of the fundamental concerns associated with making the space as inviting as it needs to be is the quality of the restrooms. They can't feel like a second tier environment, and that's one of the reasons why we believe when those doors are open, we have to have staff present.
Where, maybe it's not marked, is the handicapped access to the square?
Two thoughts on that. One is all of the pedestrian entries in all directions will be ADA accessible entries. And currently today, there are changes in grade across the square that are not ramped. You know, there's curb lines and that kind of thing. Those will be eliminated. I mean, there will obviously be some areas that steps, but the whole facility will be much more wheelchair friendly than it is today. Secondly, the intention for the middle block of the three, let me see if I can get there real quick, is to have a designate. You can barely see it here. There's a white roof of a vehicle showing there that there would be a designated pull-off, drop-off area. You see it happen sometimes now where folks.
Where is that?
In the middle.
Like where people pull up for bond.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, okay.
So instead of that happening organically, it would be provided for, you know, there would be a separate travel lane and a separate little pull-off. That will serve a number of purposes. It will serve folks dropping off friends or family that have mobility issues at the spot where they'll be all the way on grade to their destination. And it will also facilitate Uber and Lyft pickup and drop off, things like that.
So on the Church Street side now, where the bollards are, it seems like there's I always see
Because of
vans
bands.
loading in, folks that are, I mean, is there going to be, because with that design, it looks like that has been straightened, that line has been straightened out, and I wonder, because that's great if somebody gets a drop-off right there at Wall Street, but what if they have to get to Delaney's? Seems like it would be a closer access, you know what I'm saying, like having an access on each side?
We can look at that. I don't think that's
Is
what
that-
envisioned in the current design.
Drop off of Church Street?
Yes.
I don't know how they'd get back
But I
out
thought
safely.
you already had that
Well,
in
it seems like now
plans
it's sort of, I don't know if it was
to
intentional.
have a
Where
space,
the bollards are now.
taking up some of Church Street to have that space for drop-off and for band usage.
It's probably
That's
dangerous.
playing at Spring Fling or whatever.
I don't know, it just seems like.
We think when there's large events, you know, like a large setup, then we could pull bollards to bring vans in on the, you know, both the Dunbar and the Main Street corridors, again, are being designed so that the bollards could be pulled and they'd be accessible to vehicle traffic. So that's, but to
Like for
your
the fire
question of a
trucks.
drop-off, a convenience drop-off on the Church Street side, it's not currently in the design. If that's a note that we need to take back, we can
I
talk
just
with
didn't know
you.
if it was possible. It seems like where the bollard is now off of Church, and maybe that's not designed that way, but that has seemed to be a makeshift drop-off for folks. And I've seen Ubers pull into that as well.
Yes.
So that's just an opinion. I'm not an architect, so I don't know, but, and then my last question is back to where the pavilion is that is flat? So it goes straight out into the grassy area?
Yes,
So-
it's at grade.
Back to your point about, would a stage, an actual raised stage even fit underneath that pavilion? I personally do not like the idea of having a stage on the Dunbar side. There's nowhere for that music to travel I don't know, I'm kind of a,
Because you can listen to it going down west.
yeah, I mean, when the way that things are
Theory,
set up
rather.
now and Music on Main, you know, that music kind of travels in that direction. It seems like everything would be enclosed in those, in between, you know, Dunbar and Main Street, and a stage just needs to be raised. So would one be able to fit underneath that pavilion, a raised stage, if you had to bring them in and bring them out?
You know, if we had like a 24 or 30-inch raised stage, it would fit underneath that pavilion.
Okay.
We can
Because
go-
I'd prefer that we, you know, my opinion is to leave it, that the music
Yeah,
goes this way and not,
I
that
just,
way.
just with all the different designs,
It's more
I mean,
green space too for
it's,
folks to-
it's actually, you know, you give other opportunities for just a different look, you know, for, we'll just say a Music on Main, having it face the buildings. I definitely get what you're saying, but just
'Cause you're just-
a different look.
well, that, I mean, doing that way, the space where people hang out, or where they typically would, where they do now, they're just gonna be standing on a bunch of concrete.
Well, I think all that changes though, once we see the final design, it's gonna be a little bit more grassy areas in space.
I agree with Rob. I don't like the pavilion.
That illustration,
That makes three of us.
that illustration right there,
It's just,
which way is that facing? Like,
This is from the center of the square looking toward Church Street.
Okay.
so if I were standing where the water fountain currently is in the center of the square, and I looked up toward Pokey Nor, or up toward Groucho's,
Yeah.
that's what I would see.
Correct.
That
Where
that
does the
profile.
hub city then face?
That's on the Church Street side.
It's on the other
Oh.
side.
I mean, I like it.
I mean, I don't know that I want to be a,
You
you
might-
know,
yeah, you
the
might be
design
too modern.
police, right? I mean, it goes through our design and review I mean, I, you know, that, to me, I mean, even
I don't like.
personal interests and likes aside, I mean, I just want to make sure whatever we end up with is functional and will stand the test of time, so that we're not, you know, looking at something 10, 15 years from now that just doesn't fit in today's world. I mean, you know, we look at our city hall and, you know, our, you know, old height, I mean, there were a lot of examples of that clearly dated themselves, over time. And that can be cool in some respects too, but I just want to make sure we're creating something that is inviting.
Yes, sir.
Can we go to the, I guess it's kind of a civil set, with the contours?
He actually texted me yesterday.
That's back.
It was not the aerial, but the rendering that had there.
That's one you want.
Yeah, I guess not civil set. Is that, so, I think what I don't understand seeing this is, what is the elevations of various points of the square? Like, how much higher is the hill where the buildings are than the street? And is Dunbar Street getting brought up to be at the same elevation as Main Street? Like, what is the?
Dunbar Street surface will only be slightly higher. What about it, 8 or 10 inches higher?
I think this shows it best. So in this view, Main Street is in the lower right, it's in the foreground. So if you're up near Church Street, the lawn is essentially level with the Church Street sidewalk. So if you came in from church, or you crossed from East Main over,
Are the buildings to the right, on the right side of the page that?
yes, they're just not in the model.
Okay.
Yeah, so they'd be on the right side there. So it's flush with the Church Street sidewalk, then, as you know, Main Street drops, but the lawn stays level. So that's where the terraces start to increase in height, and we sort of break it up with the existing trees and the landscape. And then the same thing happens on Dunbar. So Dunbar and Church Street, you would come out into that lawn at the same grade as you are on the Church Street sidewalk. And then as Dunbar Street goes down, that lawn stays more level, so it stays flat. And that's what gives you the change.
So it's pretty tall. I mean, it's a couple, 2.5, maybe people size.
Yeah, so the highest elevation is really at these steps that you see here. Excuse me. So you've got about 6 to 7 feet of grade change at the highest point, and that goes down to 0 as you move your way up towards Church Street.
And Church Street and Dunbar are not, because right now you have the slope of the land from Church Street down, but it's also sloping from Main Street down to Dunbar. So there's two slopes.
Right.
Are we fixing that, or is there still gonna be, essentially, is Dunbar gonna, and Main Street gonna be at the same elevation, or is Dunbar still gonna be below?
Dunbar and Main will stay very, very similar to their grades today because they have to tie in, just, even if it's just for emergency vehicles. You couldn't have, for example, couldn't have Dunbar flatten out and then, you know, have a vehicle drop off at the end. So Main and Dunbar stay essentially the way they are today.
Yeah.
And then we tie in the middle of the square.
So, my other issue then, understanding that, is from the beginning, I think, from my perspective, and I think the same feedback I gave y'all, some of the issue with the square today is it's very segmented with elevation changes, so it's choppy, right? Like you see music on Main, people will gather around the fountain, and then they'll gather in the grass, but then it's kind of chopped up, is my opinion. My hope is that we would flatten, like take out that choppiness so that you would have potentially both sides of the square activated with similar elevations on Main and Dunbar, and lower, you still gotta get that slope because you gotta get to Wall Street, Magnolia Street, which is lower, and we're not gonna change that. But taking out some of the choppiness of the terraces of today's square, I feel like this does the opposite.
I'll have to wave my arms a little bit to explain this, but can you see the center circle of green underneath in that aerial in there that exists today?
Number 5?
Yeah, it's right where the number 5 is.
Yeah.
So you can see the lawn has expanded that. Today, on the east side, if you walk out there today, the east side of that lawn has a few more terraces that take you up towards Church. Those have been eliminated. So in terms of simplifying this, when you come in from Church Street, there's one grade out of that lawn, and then we transition down to the middle where those terraces are, and that's what connects 1 Morgan Square with Main Street. And then you have one lower, and of course, as you get west, it levels out a little bit as you work your way downhill. So number 6 is a little easier to achieve because that's the level area. So you have an upper lawn, which is flush with Church Street, as opposed to having multiple grade changes today. That lawn has been expanded, simplified, so it's less broken up with the steps. And then we have that lower lawn where you have just sort of the path and the bushes and some other things that's been sort of opened up and it's flush to walk in. So for example, if you look on the south side of number 6, that lower lawn, you could walk from Main Street right into that lawn from anywhere on the south side. There's no step or grade change. It's just very easy to flow in and out of that space.
Yeah.
And that's, those 3 segments that you just described, that's consistent from yellow line to yellow line across the square?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, I mean, like, it doesn't vary as you progress from 1 Morgan Square over to the buildings on the southern side of the square.
You do have a little bit of a drop. So where you see number 12, do you see the 12s that are in there?
Yeah.
That's where we have, it's a gentle slope, but that's where we have some of the garden
Right.
material that we showed there. So we wanted to have sort of the active Main Street businesses be able to flow into those spaces in the flush lawn. And then we have a path that sort of curves along that edge there so you can walk around those. And that's level and wheelchair accessible. And then there's sort of a gentle slope where you see the 12 that has some of the.
But if I meet outside at Delaney's and I'm sitting on the western side, I'm not looking up to the person on the eastern side. Like you do now, you see what I'm saying?
Of the,
Like if I'm at a table, it's gonna be flat as opposed to like that.
it's kind of a gentle, slow slope that runs.
From right to left?
Yeah.
That exists today.
I mean,
That
Main
exists
Street
today.
continues to do larger than what it does today.
Okay.
So that condition won't change dramatically.
What we're not fixing though, I was hoping we would fix is 1 Morgan Square is the same finished floor elevation as the buildings on the south side. But Dunbar is a whole lot lower than Main Street. I thought that we were bringing Dunbar up so that the square doesn't slope down. We're taking advantage of all the buildings on both sides of the square being on the same finished floor elevation and easing that grade. Because if you think about 1 Morgan Square, there's those big lawns that run down to Dunbar. I don't understand why we're not bringing Dunbar up so it's even with Main
It's the
Street.
connection at the east and west ends makes that really challenging. So we are raising Dunbar 6 inches, so it's flush with the curb. But if, for example, you raised it up flush with the finished floor of Morgan Square,
We're not flush with the finished floor, but just flush, mirroring, because Main Street, both Main Street and Dunbar have to slope east and west. But why are they not at the same level, sloping the same way?
because we have to meet up at Magnolia. So anywhere you raise Dunbar just makes it a steeper slope as you approach Magnolia. So if you consider Church and Dunbar and Magnolia and Dunbar as fixed points in order to have emergency access, anywhere between those fixed points that you want to raise and flatten out, by necessity steepens up another portion of it.
Church and Dunbar and Magnolia and Dunbar.
Those are fixed points we have to hit in order to have emergency vehicles and service vehicles through there.
Right.
So we have to be able to meet grade. So if you wanted to, for example, at the center of that, where 1 Morgan Square, if you wanted to kind of grab Dunbar and pull it up, then the stretch from Dunbar to Magnolia gets steeper. And the stretch from Dunbar to Church is more gradual, but you've created that steeper condition that you have to address then.
But I wouldn't, I mean, are Wall Street and Magnolia Street on different elevations? They're the same. I mean, what I'm saying is Main Street makes it from Church Street down to Wall Street. Dunbar's got to make it from Church Street down to Magnolia, but I'm not picturing a huge difference in elevation of Wall Street and Magnolia Street.
It flattens out as you get west. The difference there is less than
Yeah, so if, and maybe I still don't understand why Dunbar and Main Street meet Church Street at similar elevations, right?
No, there's different elevations at Church and Dunbar than there are at Church and Main. They're not the same elevation.
It's a good bit lower at Dunbar and Church.
15 feet of grade change from east to west, and you've got about 5 to 6 feet north to south.
We could work in sections the way we did.
Yeah.
So it's what we did.
Yeah, I think we just need to look at the total. I guess is my,
I think that's probably Design 101, 201. I mean, y'all understand how to make elevations meet and all of that. I'm saying I think there's certain elements of the design that we can trust to the professionals. But Chris, do you feel like you have from us, not trying to cut anyone off, but do you feel like you have direction enough from us for whatever the next step is?
On some aspects, let me tell you what I think I've heard, and then you'll tell me if
Okay,
I
yeah.
got it right or wrong. I think I've heard you want some additional thought on the outdoor dining, and maybe a little bit additional detail about the respective zones and how they could be furnished certain ways. The harder part for me to take away from the conversation have been the comments related to sort of the style. So I'd encourage any additional dialogue amongst the council in the coming days and weeks about that, if there are sort of if there's specific feedback about any of the aesthetic choices reflected. I'd like to try to dial in on those. That I'm about the least equipped in the room to deal with any aesthetic
Anything with
issues.
style.
And then I think we do have some specific questions that we can deal with follow-up images to illustrate exactly what we have in the plan. And then I think there's a little bit more information we can share with you all about event configurations and programming types of things. But I think we may need to, as a staff team, regroup after this meeting and see if we heard the same things and see what thoughts might be on next steps of moving through some of these.
And ultimately, we're gonna have to vote on this, right?
Yes.
And I think from my perspective, this is gonna be a 20-year decision.
Yeah.
Oh,
So we better make sure.
Easily
we
20.
Chris, are you planning to bring us, as far as budget approval, the 15 that is what we're seeing now, or the 17 that extends down to include the clock tower piece?
I'd like to do it as one if possible.
17.
Okay.
So, and that's what we're working to do right now about estimates on the other pieces. So,
And that implementation work would be done in the same time, it wouldn't be phased, it would be done all at once.
that's our goal, yes,
Chris-
is to have it minimize the disruption by banging away on what makes sense efficiently.
And that'll catch us up to what's happening on the West Main corridor and then what's gonna be happening in the Green District.
Yes, sir.
I mean, I think it's gotta be, are you gonna bring that as one item? Cause I'm not gonna weigh in at all on anything in front of the Herald Journal site.
Right. What's,
But I do feel like I could weigh in on stuff up here that doesn't affect my business.
I understand.
But if you're gonna bring it all as one, then I would not.
Well, I think from, we can go back to that graphic of what I think of as sort of components A, B, and C. Whoops, I'm sorry, I'm going in a different direction. A, B, and C.
Spoiler alert.
I don't think the primary footprint of the square, it obviously doesn't touch that block. I don't think that center small block touches that block. So I think maybe
I'm fine with
bundle
that. I
it.
think I'm fine with those two. I just don't wanna
Yeah. Understand.
make the far left side.
Don't forget to just look and see if there's accessibility on just look.
Yes, got that note as well. So,
Accessibility on the
Handicap accessibility.
opposite end as well.
all right, well, we'll work on these follow-up items, and I'll communicate with you between now and the next meeting about some additional aspects to give Darren and team a chance to chew on some of what they heard as well.
All right.
And I wanna say, I mean, we're all super appreciative of the committee and all of y'all.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
everyone's
Oh,
work
yes.
doing this. Our issues aren't indicative of a lack of appreciation of the work. We just gotta
Sure.
Actually, we're gonna have to vote for this.
Yeah.
Let's get it right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
I think
Rob,
that's the-
Rob, you make a great point with that. I mean, we are definitely appreciative of the committee that worked so hard, like I said, over a year and a half, trying to get this thing together and getting it before us to to chop it up, so.
Well, and the design review board
Yeah.
has done their work, as we've asked them to do, so.
We just don't want
So, no, we're good. So we're at item 11, update, no, I'm sorry, item 12, staff updates. We're gonna start with Mr. Story.
Yes, sir. I have two topics I'd like to cover tonight. The first is, want to give an update on storm cleanup and debris removal. We are now at 195,000 cubic yards of debris removed. And I used ChatGPT to get me some new ways of putting that in context. If we were to have taken that debris and put it on a football field,
ask you to do that.
it would be 109 feet tall. So it'd be about 10 stories tall if we stacked the debris on the football field that we've already moved.
On one football field.
If we stacked it on one football field, it would be about 11 stories tall. If we stacked it 1 foot deep, it would cover 109 football fields.
There you go.
Wow.
It is.
Satisfied, Jamie?
That's good enough. Keep
Now
going.
this is another one. If we took the 5,265,000 cubic feet of debris that we have moved and stacked them one in a row, 1 foot at a time, it would reach from here to Des Moines, Iowa. About 1,000 miles if it was done that way.
You nerded out good on
I
that
know.
one.
I got one more. If we
You feel good about
And we have, we have about 186 miles of roadway that the city owns and maintains. There's a lot more in the city that SCDOT maintains, but from those 186 miles of city road, we have collected 5.36 cubic feet of debris for every single linear foot of roadway. So if you think about it, that's just an overwhelming volume of stuff. We are continuing to work with our contractor every day at our we have 2 sites that we are processing debris at. There's material coming in and material going out every day. There's grinding and processing of all that material. Many of the calls we get are related to SCDOT's roadways, so we're in nearly daily communication with them about as they work to deal with their right-of-ways, and there's progress being made. We are back checking all of our maps to make sure that we think we are very close to having done a first brush on the entire city footprint of city maintained streets. But as you know, there'll be a second pass as well. We do ask folks to communicate with us, and many are, about needs or issues or safety concerns. You know, there is still more debris coming out of folks' backyards, and as we've made first passes. I remain very proud of our public works team and all the work they're putting in, and continue to appreciate their efforts to get the worst first, the higher density areas, and now we think we've made it to just about everywhere, but we're not able to say tonight that we're certain we've made it everywhere, because we know of a punch list that we're working through this week, and then we'll begin the second pass around. So that work is continuing, and we appreciate everybody's patience. It'll still be some time before we are able to deal with areas like parks, and there are areas that are city-owned, that are, for example, medians between split roadways and things like that we've got a lot of work to do on. So the journey continues, but 5,265,000 cubic feet of material is something I never thought we'd be dealing with, and that's what we moved today. So,
awesome. Thank you.
The second topic I wanted to discuss was, it's our objective downtown to always be trying to increase activity, always, and try to increase downtown as a destination. One of the counterintuitive things about the hospitality industry, the food and beverage industry, is that more options tend to beget more traffic for everyone. I know it happens in my house that there'll sometimes be a text of, do y'all want to come downtown for dinner? We say downtown for dinner. We don't pick a specific destination until folk get downtown. So we're always trying to look to add to that, and we're also trying to eliminate and fill in areas that are not contributing to the extent we can. So I wanted to ask for feedback on one concept that staff's been working on. This is a locator map of downtown. The star is over the southwest corner of the Magnolia Street garage. The Magnolia Street parking garage is our busiest parking garage. It sits just north of 1 Morgan Square, and of course on the other side of 1 Morgan Square is Morgan Square itself. Sits on Magnolia Street. When it was originally built, there was a bank that operated from an adjacent building, and that bank, when this development was all happening, the bank had drive-through teller lines. And you see that remains in place but hasn't been utilized in years. The actual vehicle use of the garage from Magnolia Street is on the left-hand side of this image, and that's of course where people go in and out of the garage. So this space that you see in the center of the image hasn't been used in quite some time, and of course Magnolia Street is a busy part right off of our square. So in some brainstorming, this is just another example to locate it. We see the buildings on the western side of Magnolia Street, and then we have the garage, which doesn't have any active uses associated with it. We are considering and have done some preliminary evaluation of the viability of adding a retail or restaurant space in that space occupied by the former bank teller space. We've talked with architects and engineers and believe it can be reasonably economically efficiently built out there. And this is just one concept. The actual design might look very different, but in this concept you see an outdoor dining space that would come out toward the sidewalk, putting people on both sides of the streets where we don't have that now, which we think would be positive. You know, getting some engaging positive activity as people come out of the garage and walk up to the square. Just a couple other images of this one design concept for that space, and how it would fit into that and sort of come out from the existing structure of the square. This is just showing it as a restaurant layout, and you can see how it could function and be a decent sized restaurant space. So just wanted to, I'm not asking for any kind of formal approval of anything and don't have a definitive recommendation, but I just want to introduce this concept publicly and see if there was a general sentiment on council to continue to explore this. This could be a near-term thing, this could be a 2 years down the road thing, or this could be a never thing, and all of those are options that are available, but just want to see what feedback y'all might have on the concept.
You want my opinion?
Yes, ma'am.
I like it.
You know what, that would be a great location for people that are coming from the ballpark. Yeah.
I also
a
like
great
that it takes a
location.
dead space that's not being used for anything
And activate
and
it.
converts it into something that's active.
We believe one of the things that we're excited about is, you know, we have just north of this image is the new courthouse, which of course has a public dedication, formal dedication tomorrow. And there are a whole lot of, you know, hundreds of folks that go to work there every day. And so we hope that's another driver of demand for restaurant and retail stuff in that part of downtown.
Chris, in your illustration there, it looks like General Morgan's been,
I know, I was wondering that
toppled over.
I think it's,
beheaded.
this is from Google
Not on the
Earth.
move,
And
is he,
I
in
noticed that too after it was too late to refresh the image. It was a Google Earth image, but the general is doing just fine, actually.
I love it too. I think it draws people to a part that's kind of in the middle of two growing areas, you know, the courthouse side and then what we're gonna be doing on Morgan Square. And yeah, take something that's doing a whole lot of nothing and activates it in a really cool looking way.
And it's proximate to parking.
Yes.
Yeah, that it's in a parking garage.
Yes.
Right.
It's not enough parking.
Well, if there isn't any other concerns on that, we'll continue to workshop that idea and share it with some members of the real estate development community and other folks that might have interest and option. And
Thank you.
If there are any additional questions from me, Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to have them, but I'm also very happy to sit down.
Thank you, Mr. Story. We appreciate it. Item 13, city council updates. Councilwoman Smith.
Yeah, just real quickly, some of us noticed that Mitch is not here tonight. He is in Myrtle Beach at the South Carolina Recreation and Parks Association, and our very own Kim Brown, the director of our Parks and Rec Department, was awarded the Professional of the Year Award tonight. Very proud of her. We know the hard work that she puts in and the great staff that she runs. And then, you know, sometimes we mention the loss of giants in our community, and this past week we lost a true one in Reverend Dr. Kirk Neely. I've known him for a very long time, and good family friends. His funeral will be Friday at 2 o'clock at First Pres. So, he led a life of humor and love and grace and teaching, and leaves a really strong legacy. And Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays and Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councilman Ford.
Congratulations to Kim, and certainly extend condolences to the Neely family on their loss. And then again, hope everybody has a Merry Christmas and a wonderful holiday season. We'll see you next year.
Councilman Brown.
Mr. Mayor, congratulations, Kim. Look forward to celebrating her when she gets back. Merry Christmas, everyone. Keeping this light because I have to leave very early tomorrow morning to go out of town, so I'm ready to eat and pack.
Got you. Councilman Rain.
Merry Christmas to those still in the audience.
Councilwoman Lil John.
I have to laugh at Rob. Rob is so short. Anyway, I am so sorry to hear about Dr. Neely. I used to go to his church. I would go there first. I would leave there and then go to Mount Moriah. I loved his messages, so I am sorry to hear that. Congratulations, Kim. I was down in Myrtle Beach from the 24th through the 26th of November for a conference down there, and I missed you all. I really missed being here with you all. So, and then on the Arbor Day, on the 6th of December, and then we had another one go with Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority, EBO, on the 7th of November ago. We planted 14 trees. They planted 14, I had plant 1, okay. And then the Water had their party on last week. That was wonderful there. And one other thing, if I can read it. I just want to share this, because this is not good, because this is bad. I had a guy that was supposed to give me an estimate for cutting down some trees from my lot on the 6th. He was supposed to be meeting me at my lot to give me an estimate on the 6th. I didn't hear from him, and so I phoned him and I phoned him, and then the next day I phoned again. I still didn't get an answer. So the guy who referred him to me, I saw him on Thursday, and he said to me, I guess you heard. And I said, what? And the guy was killed in a motorcycle accident the day before he was supposed to meet me. So I say to these people on these motorcycles, God, be careful, because folks are not paying attention. God, they are just not paying attention. So I was really shocked to hear that the day before he was supposed to meet me, he was killed on a motorcycle accident. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank
and
you.
y'all have a Merry Christmas.
You too.
Well,
Pro Tem.
yes. To Kim, congratulations. To the Neely family, my deepest condolences. I know how that is. And I want to say that I shared lunch with the School of Deaf and Blind, who are celebrating 125th years of existence, and enjoyed the students who sang to us. I also enjoyed the Christmas of Dickens, and I didn't see not one council member at Christmas of Dickens. I must have been the only one out there freezing.
I was there.
It's because we were at
I
Dickens
didn't
of,
see you.
Janie, we were at Dickens of a Christmas.
You were at Christmas of a Dickens.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, I got it.
Also, the Christmas parade was nice, and it was well attended, and I was very surprised because of the weather. Said one thing but did another, so thank everyone who did come out for that. And thank you all for sitting and waiting for us to get finished. Have a Merry Christmas.
Yeah. Again, condolences to the Neelys, tremendous loss, big giant here in the community. I wish you would have reminded me or told me something earlier, but anyway. happy holidays to everyone. Chris, we had I lost my train of thought, for the police. They had some evaluation.
Yes.
They had a. Yes, Mr. Mayor, they had an accreditation inspector
Yes.
in town,
Yeah.
for a few days
I
going
met
through
her.
their
and that-
annual
you
accreditation process.
Yeah, you had to choose accreditation, thank you. I know I'm cutting you off. But I met her, and she said it was so well that the police, what we're doing was outstanding. And she actually made a comment, if she didn't live anywhere else, she would love to live in Spartanburg, you know. So I'm like, wow, that was pretty awesome, and that I remembered that. Again, happy holidays to everyone. Merry Christmas to you. And to the 6 people in the city that works for the city of Spartanburg that will celebrate their birthday on December the 25th. There are 6 that works for the city of Spartanburg that will celebrate a birthday.
Including you
Including me.
and Christy.
I was gonna get to that.
Oh,
Almighty, jumping the gun. Thank you.
excited
Happy
for your
birthday.
birthday.
Happy birthday. Happy birthday to the other 5 and myself. Again, thank you guys here. Enjoy the time with your families. I do appreciate all you guys do for the city of Spartanburg and giving your time and your energies to questions and things, items as the square and everything else that has to go on. Trust me, I understand the commitment that we all have stepped up with, but I do appreciate each and every one of you, your family, as well as I've gotten to meet and love them and appreciate them for lending you to us to have this time to be together. With that being said, I'm stringing out these 3 hours. All in favor? And actually, I can't stay.
You can't stay.
No.
I am sad.
I'll talk to Kristen.
I like that, I was with his son.
You started early with